How's it going? I'm Jared Gillis. Welcome to another All About RVs. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the expectations that we might have around RVing. Some of those expectations might be around boondocking, or they might be the RV parks or campgrounds or the RVs themselves or the locations you might want to go to. So how do those expectations line up against the reality of RVing? So to start off first on our list, let's talk about the expectations of boondocking, because when we started out full-timing RV, we just thought, I thought we were going to be boondocking everywhere. Everywhere we went, there was just going to be an easy place to boondock. We were going to have it all to ourselves. It was going to be very secluded. And there's also expectation nowadays that it feels like all the boondocking places are already taken. So where does the reality lie in this? The reality of it really lands somewhere in the middle. There are amazing places to get out there and go boondocking, and it feels like you're all by yourself. But then there's other times where you can hardly find a boondocking place in the area just because of where you're at in the country. And if you haven't been there, you're going to rely on apps and different information that's already published out there on the internet. And if you go to that specific spot, it is probably going to look overloaded, overcrowded, and no place extra to boondock. But sometimes you have to put in that little extra effort to be able to find a place that may not be on one of the apps, but around that surrounding area where you can still be on national forest or BLM land and find a little bit secluded area. So sometimes that means you have to drop the RV off and be able to explore a little bit so you don't get yourself in a pickle you can't get out of with a larger vehicle. But finding those locations can take a little bit of work, but can still be found out there. So I've found that sometimes what you expect kind of looks like the reality until you dig a little bit deeper, ask around in a place that you're not familiar with to be able to find those places that are much better. Some are going to be knocking it out of the park and just going to be amazing, and some aren't going to live up to that expectation. But that's the fun part, of to keep digging, keep looking, and to find those amazing places that are out there. As we move on to the next one, here's the funny thing about the expectations is oftentimes they're rooted in the truth, but when you move them into the absolutes, that's when the expectations don't really line up with all of reality. So while you could say that RV parks and RV campgrounds are cramped, overcrowded, expensive, and difficult to get into, that definitely can be true depending on where you're going. It all depends on what you're trying to book and what you're trying to do. So sometimes we make our reservations and we're looking really far in advance because we know that location is really hard to book. But then you start looking around and there are other places to be able to go and camp and book, and there are available places to get out to. It just depends on the specific location you are looking for. So yes, some campgrounds you have to book way in advance, and some campgrounds you can almost drive up to and find a spot. And the same can be said for the experience that you would like to have. Sometimes they pack you in like sardines, but that's not everywhere. There are campgrounds out there that give you a little bit more space. They want you to have a better experience. So sifting through the campgrounds to find those locations is something I like to do because I don't want to feel like I'm just cramped in there. When I look out the window, I'm not seeing somebody's awning sticking right into the window or almost touching the slide. I like a little bit more space around the RV, and you can find those places. Now, before we start talking about the RVs themselves, sometimes the locations can really be deceiving, especially with all the social media and stuff that is out there today. These locations, a lot of times, can be almost glamorized or don't necessarily represent the experience that you might have there. I'm definitely guilty of this one. When you go to these locations, whether it's just for memories or posting, you want to take the best photo that you possibly can. So you're going to wait, you're going to strategize, you're going to do the best things that you can to take that photo. This is really evident because my oldest son loves photography. He started posting his photos to Pickfair, whether it funds his hobby or grows into something more. It's a place that he can start to sell those photos, but he wants to take the best ones that he possibly can. These aren't just photos that we're taking on iPhones. We're waking up early, we're trying to find the best lighting. We're going to these locations where there might be tons of people and waiting for that optimal time to be able to take the photo to where it looks like nobody is there, but in reality, there's tons of crowds everywhere. That's just the way it is with these popular places. Like you go to Angel Oak, there's just going to be a ton of people there all the time. So trying to take that photo to where you can get the optimal timing and trying to remove the people from the picture takes a lot of work, but the end result can be a beautiful photograph. And so I appreciate these photos that are out there that capture these places in that way. But this is a big area where your expectation may not match reality. When you go to these places, you're gonna have to work to get that photo, and it may not be that wilderness experience. It's harder to find those wilderness experiences unless you're really putting in the effort to go to somewhere really remote. So these popular places, you're gonna be sharing with the crowds because they are amazing. They're beautiful. Everybody wants to check them out. That's why you're there too. So the reality is there's going to be crowds, and there's going to be more people at these beautiful places and locations. The good thing is there's plenty of places to get out and see. Sometimes you have to put in more effort to go on a hike to find something a little bit more remote. Sometimes you have to put in more effort to research something that's maybe a little more under the radar, but there's still amazing places to get out there and see. So let's talk about the RV next. Now, on the topic of RVs as a whole, like the actual RV itself, can kind of be a little bit of a can of worms when you start to look into it. Are they built quality? Can they last? Is it something that's just going to be riddled with problems the entire time that I own an RV? Here's the reality that I see with RVs. I wouldn't say that they are all junk, but as I've walked through some and some different manufacturers, there's absolutely RVs out there that I just flat out would not buy. I don't think the quality, the craftsmanship, or the materials used are up to par. But I would say on the flip side of that, there are a lot of really good RVs out there that will serve you for a really long time as long as you maintain them well. Now, I'm not saying that's a guarantee that you're never gonna have a problem in your RV. There's going to be problems that do arise, but sometimes problems get associated with RVing when it could have been solved with preventative maintenance. I would say that my last point, though, is probably the most important when it comes to RVing, because RVing really is what you make of it. For instance, we went to this RV park and there was a lot of problems associated with the RV park. We went to go plug in power and there was just a card in there that said 50 amp power wasn't working. That was their solve for that problem. It's just not working. There were sites that were closed off for power problems or drainage issues. The lights were falling apart throughout the park. There was a lot of things that you could nitpick in the park, but there was a lot of things about the park that were still really enjoyable, and there were things that you could still appreciate and enjoy while you're there. So when it comes to RVing and our expectations versus reality, I would say that my perspective is things may not always line up exactly with what your expectations might be, but sometimes that's just a shift in what our perspective needs to be. And the great thing is we have so many good resources and things available to us that we can shape RVing for how we would like now. We have more resources available to us than we ever have before in RVing. So I think that's gonna do it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you wanna see more videos about RVing, hit that subscribe button. And if we don't see you on the road, hopefully we will see you next video.